Right, so the talks today were fairly general and they covered a pretty wide range of topics, and I didn't want to deviate from that theme. So the questions I'm going to ask are fairly open-ended, and answer them how you see fit. I see this more as an opportunity to sort of just talk about your thoughts on the space. We're not going to do a deep dive into any particular topic. So, question number one. What do you see as one of the most important technical challenges within your ecosystems? We'll have to share mics. Anyone can start.
I'd like to start. So, with Ethereum 2, test. Alright. So, with Ethereum 2, we're working with Lodestar, mainly light client infrastructure. This means networking, tooling, light client proofs, and this is really like this missing piece in Ethereum infrastructure, or like just not valued enough, where you're reliant on like these big providers like Infora, which you like prefer to have something trustless, something that you can just spin up, join easily without cost, see what the network is like, read your contract, interact with the chain, and believe in the chain without like these kind of trust relations with central providers.
I would say it's one that kind of applies to everybody, and it's private key management. Most of the problems that we think about today are purely technical. It's like we know there's answers out there, it's just throwing enough devs at it maybe, but stuff like how do you adequately handle the user experience is a social problem. It's not necessarily something you can solve with code, it's more about changing the way people think about the tools they use, or the tools that they want to use, why they would use them, how you can sort of support that, whether it's social recovery or web of trust. Those are like very big social coordination problems that aren't just going to be solved by tech.
Yeah, definitely for Polkadot specifically, the governance is going to be an experiment that's going to be a technical challenge. We're not exactly sure exactly how it's going to roll out. Right now we're seeing some quick developments in there and moving quickly how the community wants it, but going forward as Polkadot's going to be bigger, the governance, the on-chain governance mechanisms, making sure that it goes at the right pace of adaptability and doesn't go too fast or too slow. That's something that, it's going to be a big challenge and a huge experiment.
For us, it's really infrastructure. We have great functionality, we have a growing community, but there's some key pieces of infrastructure that are still missing that we need to build to really make it more vibrant and more secure.
And I think we're all sharing all of these these problems and these challenges.
So something that you two touched on leads me to my next question, which is, what do you see as some of the most important social challenges within your ecosystem? The relationship also between technology and community.
Yeah, I think it's the social challenge is finding this balance between loyalty and some open-mindedness. We've seen a lot of maximalism in this space that really makes the whole kind of it impacts the developer community negatively. And I think that's why it's great to come to these conferences. It's great to come to these conferences and see people actually talk to each other, and we're not all screaming like we are on Twitter. The thing is, we have similar goals, all in different teams building different technical solutions, and we are even borrowing each other's tech in many ways. With P2P networking, with Polkadot and ETH2, and just keeping a friendly kind of approach is something that's going to be tough going forward. Something I want to see forward.
I'd say that a big problem is, in a way, socializing the tech to a larger audience. at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which blockchain, which protocol works underneath it. What's much more important is to make sure that entrepreneurs and developers feel like they can access the technology, use it for its specific purpose. You know, all of these technologies have different features and can be used in different ways for different purposes, but if nobody is even like aware that they exist or know how to use them, they'll never get to that point to even do so. So I think like building it in a way that's not only open source, but people are aware of, that they can use it and actually utilize it.
So I think another big social challenge you'll share is adoption. And adoption is like this challenge, like tooling. And think of like Web3.js, it's like this JavaScript library used for many years before you got this more of this diversity. It's really helped adoption, create all these different tabs. And how like put Lodestar in a position like this, where you can have like someone that experiments, then creates this initial tooling for Ethereum too. Like you need these kind of browser utilities, and otherwise just be like take too long to be introduced in like a new experimental ecosystem.
So in addition to those universal challenges, I think Ethereum Classic faces a unique one because of its history. And that's transformation, to go from what was essentially a protest movement about governance to something that's evolving, innovative, and willing to collaborate. And making that case both internally and externally. That's certainly our approach, and I think we've made some progress. We still have some work to do internally, I think, more than externally. But trying to get a community to change its attitude really and change its identity a little bit is an extremely difficult thing to do.
Your answers keep preempting my next questions. So, I know what it is. On that note, one of the themes tonight has been interoperability and sort of being chain agnostic. And at ChainSafe, that's something that we certainly believe in very strongly, is judging different projects on their merit and not based on some preconceived loyalty. So on that topic, and I think I know what you guys might say to this, but what are your thoughts on tribalism? And, if you're not for it, maybe how can we fight against it?
Yeah, I'm really against maximalism.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. We can have some tribalism and survive and still be able to work with each other. Some degree of it. Like Bitcoin has a very strong narrative that they are not going to change anything via hard fork, and that's their strong narrative, and that's fine, and that's useful for certain applications. It's suitable as some sort of gold-like currency. But for people to take any stance and kind of say that that's the only way is something that is really destructive and exclusive, exclusionary. It's some of the tweets that people are saying, if you just swap out some of the blockchains with something else, it sounds really bad. Like, I don't see why you don't just speak English. The network effects are greater. And there's some really, it can make us all look like make us look not so good. And as Billy was talking about, we need to reach more developers, more users, and maximalism puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth, I think.
Yeah, I mean, dogma in any format is usually like a way to become blind to like anything new, and as soon as you start doing that, you stop updating, you stop improving. I think we're in like a weird industry because instead of being funded by DARPA or something like the way the internet was, we were funded by our neighbors and our uncles and cousins. So they're sitting around waiting for the next 10 years of our tech to actually mature. What are they going to do? They want to talk about it. And so we have this really weird investor class who's very vocal, and of course it creates these very like tribalistic things, and I think ultimately it's harms the industry. I mean, obviously it's a deal we with the devil. We're all working off of money that they basically donated to us, which is amazing to have like crowdfunding that way, but it comes with a high price.
Right. So we can talk for ages about tribalism and like things like pro-BTC. Just want to take a step backward and think about the hackathon tomorrow, right? So have friendly competition, this kind of thing. Each of us, like we bounty issues, ETH2 bounty issues, Althio bounty issues. These are the kind of things that just inviting to people to work and compete, but not be like a tribe. You want to kind of like innovative in competition. I really hope to see like these kind of hacks that help like each of us forward. Things like with P2P, for example.
I understand the value of tribalism. I mean, it brings security to a network, particularly one that's nascent and perhaps under threat for different reasons. But the way we look at things is that this technology is too new for someone to try to establish monopoly, whether it's monopoly of platform or monopoly of DApps. You know, in the end, that attitude, I think, will end up with developing technology that people won't use. So, you know, we're all trying to solve many of the same problems. It's unlikely that we're going to solve them on our own. We're only going to solve it through collaboration. And so I think maybe at the early stage of the network, there's a social need for some tribalism. But if you want to grow and if you want to thrive, you have to get beyond that.
You guys are a perfect 4 for 4 for transitions. My final question is, so where do you see the single greatest opportunity for further collaboration for your project? Yeah, let's start.
I would say with the project that we just announced today, we just released the alpha version of LLVM EVM, which will allow developers to write smart contracts in languages other than Solidity. Yeah. And this is a project we're going to expand even further and add different programming languages and really try to build on it. Because, look, the EVM is an incredibly innovative tool. It's remarkable. And we think that everybody should be using it and every developer should have access to it. And so we want to remove that barrier to entry and let other people use it too.
So I already kind of mentioned P2P. I really think like networking is this kind of common engineering problem in team projects. So when you like think about these different components, say Gossip's up, Falcon uses it, ETHDenver uses it. All these projects that kind of need to communicate, gossip, these kind of messages. We use P2P and implement this in like many different languages. And so also with ChainSafe now as Discovery v5 coming up. All these kind of networking tools, components, I really hope like we can work on these together with these projects. And in the meantime, we also build tooling for networking. I'm working on tooling for networking. I hope in the hackathon people use this kind of tooling. And between projects as well. Like this tooling is generic, it's not specific to Ethereum 2 or specific to Polkadot. Just hope like build more tooling, build more components for the P2P. I'll be better off if I stick to production.
The answer is pretty obviously IBC for us. Inter-blockchain communication. I mean, Cosmos Hub is something that helps make that happen. The Cosmos SDK is something that helps make that happen. But both of those could completely fail, and IBC could continue to sort of succeed and be the glue that sort of brings all the networks together, that allows interoperability between networks. I mean, the way we look at it is like TCP/IP. We're making Ruby on Rails, but obviously Ruby on Rails is not the only way to make, you know, an application on the internet. You don't need it. There's more than one hub on the like spoken hub model of the internet when you route traffic. You don't need either of those things. They assist in making it happen, but what's essential is a common protocol to communicate between the networks. So IBC would be that.
Yeah, so since you all took like technical routes, I'm going to try like we're working on WebAssembly as well. You know, bridges and cross-chain communication and the B2B is part of Polkadot as well, but I don't know, maybe some way, an opportunity that hasn't really come yet, but might, is to find like a common enemy for all of us. You know, like when something I was kind of hoping for, my only optimistic view when Libra was announced. That maybe it might be a wake-up call for all of us here to really have something to fight against, if it is something like that. And it might be necessary at that point, because there will be systems using these technologies we're building open source that are going to bastardize it and make it centralized and controlling and censoring people's freedom. So I hope we can all work together something like that, and maybe a point of collaboration is when there's a wake-up call needed, and we need to get our
Thanks, guys. Those are all great insights. Before we wrap up, is there anyone from the crowd who would like to ask a question to our panelists? All right.
Oh no.
Do you think that at some point you guys will become competitors? Kind of like, well, you know, what we see with a lot of the corporations, and then like even worse with like the different countries nowadays.
Yeah, so in some ways if we all have different tokens, so on that level we are competing for economic security. Anything else I would like to think we're more kind of just like doing our own thing and watching over the fence what everyone else is doing to try and learn.
Homogeneity creates like a really fragile system. It's like why it's maybe okay that there's a bunch of different currencies and a bunch of different languages. If we all spoke the same language, and then there was a problem with that language, the whole world would not be able to, I don't know, say the same word or something like that. When you have a uniform sort of system across the place, it's all going to fail in the same way. And so it's kind of important to have a diverse set of networks that have different features, different like ways that they work, so that when one fails, it doesn't succeed in that way, or just in terms of things that they support. You know, you can't support all the things all the time. So I mean, I guess, yeah, our whole thing is to kind of support that vision, and so I'm privileged that we don't need to focus so much on the competition between it, because if there are many, many networks, it's actually good for all of us.
Right. So Libra was already kind of mentioned. These kind of things where there's just one project, you grow into something worse, is something to avoid. And I think many projects keeps yourself on your toes. You want to like adapt, you want to be improved, you want to be different. So I don't think it's of competition as much as just like encouragement.
I think it'll be a long time before there's a dominant platform or a small group of dominant platforms competing for the same audience. And that the economics of blockchain already actually encourage a diversity of platforms because, you know, the investor community wants the next great token. And so I think competition is actually probably healthy. Rivalry isn't so much healthy, but I think the competition can be.
Thank you. Anyone else before we finish up? All right, thank you so much to the four of you. It means a lot to us.